Hello, welcome to Inside the Tape with Greg Cosell. It's an Inside the Birds presentation. I'm Geoff Mosher alongside Adam Caplan, and joining us as always to give a tape breakdown of the Eagles game, a 28-3 win over the New York Giants in Week 7, is Greg Cosell. Greg, I joked with Adam this week that watching the all 22 of the game doesn't necessarily or didn't necessarily reflect the 25-point win that the Eagles got. I would assume that you don't often watch a team go 1 of 13 on third down and still score 28 points on the road against a division rival to win fairly convincingly.
Is 1 of 13 not good?
At last I checked, I'm not a mathematician, but I'm pretty sure that's not real good.
Yeah, well, I wanted to. I wish I had a Ben Van Sumeren jersey, but I don't. I would have worn it.
Nice.
We'll get into that.
Yeah, it was as you guys have learned, Adam's known for years that the Eagle offense was a little bit of a tough watch.
Yeah.
Ooh.
But the larger point we'll get into in a little more detail is they were fortunate in the opponent in which they played. They were fortunate that their defense against that opponent played at a very high level, and the way in which they could play offense won that game, but would not be sustainable over the course of the season playing against good teams.
Fair enough.
How would you describe, because this is the second week in a row we're talking about, say, the quality of the opponent. They played the Browns, they played the Eagles, they played the Giants, they get wins, but how much does that factor in to what you've been watching on tape, that the level of the opponent? And I guess for the Giants it would be more about their offense, because their defense is actually pretty good.
Well, both teams they played that you mentioned, the Giants and Browns, have good defenses, have arguably playoff caliber defenses, but certainly don't have offenses that come close to fitting that categorization. So I think when I watch those kinds of games, Geoff, what I tend to look for, particularly on the Eagles' defensive side of the ball, because that's basically what we're speaking about, is I look for tactics and I look for individual play. So, because you still have to play the game, and they still game plan to play the game. You can't just write it off as, oh, they played a bad team.
Yeah.
You want to be realistic, but you also can't write it off. It's hard to win in this league on any given Sunday, as every coach will tell you. So the fact that they got 2 wins, you know what? They're 4-2. That's what matters right now. They're 4-2. So I look, as I said, I look for what they do tactically to see how the coaching staff feels that they have to play. And then I look for individual players to see how they're being deployed and if I feel like they're playing well based on the tape.
Greg, we'll get to the tape in a minute. One thing off of what you just said, do you feel, let's just defensively, do you feel like with Fangio now coming in, right? Now he's had a handful of games to learn the players and they learn him. Do you feel like there's some progress on the defensive end?
I do.
How so?
I do. And I will say this, and I think that maybe this is sometimes hard for fans to understand, but I think that coaches, even though they go through OTAs and training camp, until you start playing the games, you may feel you have a good sense of what you can do and how players will perform, but until you see them play in the games, you don't know 100%. And so I think that every new coach with new people, it is a little bit of a work in progress through the early part of a season until you find out, hey, this guy, I thought he could do this, but you know what? We've now played 4 games and he's not quite doing it the way that I thought he could do it. Or, hey, I didn't think I could use him in this role, but you know what? Every time I put him in that role, he does a really good job. You have to play the games to find that out.
Yeah, Greg, one thing that I think has jumped out that I was going to ask you about, that we're not going to look at all 22 because it's more of a concept more than a scheme, is that I think the Eagles have done a better job the last 2 weeks of tackling the ball carrier. I mean, compared to what we saw after the Tampa Bay game going into the bye week. And this is not something you say, well, you're only playing the Browns or you're only playing.
Oh no,
Giants.
that's a factor every week. Yes.
Yeah, Malik Neighbors is tough to tackle, and so is Amari Cooper, and everybody's got playmakers. So I think that's a big sort of not under discussed or underrated thing, but that was a really big issue for this team.
And I think tackling is one of those things that is very subjective to some extent because, a lot of people say, oh, they're missed tackles. And then you see a guy just, maybe get juked. And, but the way I look at that more than anything is Number one, if it's an individual player, I want to see his tackling technique, particularly if it's in space. Okay, does he break down? Does he square up? You know, you see too many DBs, and I noticed this when I watch college football. They just throw their bodies at guys. That's a problem. You know, they had to work on that with Sidney Brown, by the way. They'd spent a lot of time with Sidney Brown working on his tackling because when he was at Illinois, he was such an explosive straight line athlete. He would just run at guys and throw his body, and you could make tackles like that very often in college. That's not going to fly in the NFL. So I know for a fact they've really worked on tackling technique with him, and they feel like he's made a lot of progress. The other thing you really look for is you want to see just what you said, Geoff, and it's a great point. You want to see a lot of guys get into the football. You know, when I watch tape and I don't see that, I would never say a team's not trying because, you know, I never know what's in a guy's head. And that's such an indictment of a player. So I don't talk like that because, you know, you'd have to really know the guy. But you always want to see a lot of guys on defense getting to the football.
Right.
You know, and that's something, you know, and I know every coach wants to see that too.
Yep, absolutely. The Eagles have done a better job about that. So in this game against the Giants, we did notice that Vic Fangio again did some different things.
Yes.
And this was clearly their best defensive effort. Again, taking the opponent into mind, though. What did you observe about the coverages that Vic employed in some of the schemes as opposed to the week before?
Well, in this game, for sure, they played a much higher percentage of two high coverage, of two shell structure than they had in their previous 5 games. Now, maybe he did that because he felt that the Giants' run game was not something he really had to be concerned about relative to some other teams. We don't know the answer as to why, other than the fact that they clearly played a higher percentage of too high. The other thing, and which was clearly noticeable, was the use of sim pressures, which they've done that throughout the season. That's part of the Fangio approach. But the way they used Nakobe Dean was a significant part of their sim pressures. He was the fourth rusher more often than not. And just so people understand, I always want to say this in case we have new listeners and they don't know what sim pressure means.
Yes.
Sim pressure is a four-man rush, but you take a first level player like a D end or a D tackle, he drops out, and then you add in a second or third level player as the fourth rusher. So it remains a four-man rush, but a defensive lineman drops out, and a second or third level player adds in as the fourth rusher. And one of the main reasons you do it is because based on how you set up your defensive front, you're hoping that you can get your fourth rusher on a running back, which happened a number of times in this game with Nakobe Dean, and it was successful.
Yeah, there was a great play. I didn't isolate this one to look at where Nakobe Dean got cut by the running back, but still got back to his feet and then
Yes.
wound up getting a sack. So that was a really good high effort play
And
from
that's the
Nakobe
strength of
Dean.
his game. When he came out of Georgia, there were a lot of people that were concerned about him just playing normal linebacker in terms of playing the run because he's small and at times could get swallowed up by climbing O linemen. But he was a terrific blitzer in college, and this is something he does very well.
Right. And something that Adam and I had been discussing during the week, not only is that a strength in Nakobe Dean's game, you wonder though, because this is sort of the role that the week before was reserved for Cooper DeJean, who rushed a couple of times, somebody else dropped. And then in the before that,
It was
we
it
saw
was
Zach
Bond. It
Bond.
was Zach Bond.
Right. So you wonder if it's Vic
That's
just
good
trying to think,
coaching.
yeah,
Because
absolutely.
what
That
it
was
is it's the same concept. You're not changing the concept. Coaches coach with concepts. You guys know this. I know, Adam,
Yep.
you make your training camp tour every year and have a lot of conversations.
Yeah.
Everything is taught with concepts. You can change the personnel, but everything is taught with concepts. So the concept doesn't change, Geoff. It's just using someone different because Cooper DeJean coming off the slot 4 or 5 times the week before against the Browns is now on tape. So and they'll come back to that. They just won't come back to it in the next week or two because now that's on tape.
right. Right.
So,
Go ahead. Adam, were you going to ask
I was
something?
just saying, this is a good education for people to understand because actually someone on the YouTube comments want to know about sim pressures. So you just explain it.
Well, that's why
It's
I wanted
great.
to explain it
Yeah,
because this is the
good.
world in which I live, and
Yeah,
when I take my notes and all that, I use the words I know because I know what all this means. But
sure.
this is the world in which I live. This is what I do, 12 months a year. So, I just want to make sure people understand the
Good.
terms.
Right.
Good.
Greg, I wanted to ask you about the secondary also. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean
Yes.
Slay. I mean, Malik Neighbors has caught a lot of passes and a lot of yards against a lot of teams. So for the Eagles to hold them to 4 to 41, I thought was pretty good on their part. What did you observe about the
Well,
defensive backs?
this was a tough game to make a definitive judgment about the DBs because there was so much pressure and the Giants could never really get into a rhythm in a pass game.
Hmm.
But I will say this. We spoke about this with our Patreon customers the other night, but it's important to reiterate is they played a lot of two shell in this game, a lot of zone, and the main principle of the Fangio approach in zone is match, carry, deliver. So in other words, because it's zone still has man principles to it. So what you do is you initially match a route, and then if he leaves your area, you carry him up to a point, you stay with him, but then at a certain point, you let him go. You match, you carry, and then you're delivering to someone else. And there was one sack, and I wish I could remember which it was because they had so many, where they did a phenomenal job on Wandell Robinson of match carrying and delivering, and I believe it was third down. And I wish I could remember who made the sack. But it was
Okay.
a third down play, and they did an awesome job of match. First, it was DeJean. He passed him on to Dean, and then Blankenship from a two shell on the opposite side of the field drove on him. So, but it was a sack, so the ball was never thrown. But they did a really, really good job of match, carry, deliver.
Okay, we will take a look at a couple of sacks, so maybe one of those you'll see what we discussed in a second. And then just up front, as we finish off the defensive overall, up front, we saw some interesting things, right? Obviously, Nolan Smith playing more than Huff, I believe. And then on the interior, what did you notice about the entire defensive front?
I tell you, the guy who really stood out to me was Milton Williams. And he may not have had a sack. I don't believe he had a sack because other guys did. I know Jalen Carter had two sacks, but uh, I think that Williams really had some really strong pass rushes. Power pass rushes. He split double teams. He won some one-on-ones. To me, he stood out. And we've talked about this a lot. I've talked about it a lot when I watch college defensive tackles. You can't look at a stat sheet and see it. A defensive
Yeah.
tackle has one tackle, and then you decide, well, he didn't have a good game because he only had one tackle. You got to watch the game. And
Hmm.
I just thought Williams really, really stood out in this game. And players are starting to play better. The other thing that was interesting, and we've talked about this, is Jordan Davis only played 12 snaps.
Yeah.
And you wonder if that's a sign of things to come or who knows, but he only played 12 snaps.
Absolutely right. And I thought, and they were mostly obviously run snaps, and I thought actually he
Yeah.
was actually pretty good against the
He had a
run.
couple of really,
Yeah.
it
Mhm.
seems like every week, and Adam, I'm sorry to interrupt, you can jump in
Good.
here,
Yeah.
it seems every week he has two plays that you go, wow, that's a really good play. But that seems to be what he is. I mean, he still has not played one snap this year on third down and 6+ yards to go.
Wow. One thing before we get to the tape, I do want to ask you about Cooper DeJean. It's only been 2 games, so we're not going to give you broad statements here, but just as an overview, because we've talked throughout since he was drafted what
Yeah,
maybe he would be down the road.
yeah.
But through 2 games, what have you seen from him as an overall view?
Smart, savvy, multi-dimensional, can be used in many ways. We saw him as a strong blitzer against the Browns 2 weeks ago. Did a really nice job in their zone coverage concepts this week. My sense watching him in college, and I think it's shown up in the 2 games, is that he's an aware player, understands concepts, understands where to be. I would bet down the road, and this is always becomes a factor of how plays play out. But it would not surprise me if he has a playmaking dimension to his game as well, depending on given games and how they play out. But I think that he's shown that he's going to be a really good player, and because of the multi-dimensional nature of what he can do and his size. See, size is a trait. People don't necessarily think about that, but size is a trait and he's got really good size and he's built well.
See, Greg, what's interesting, and Geoff and I kind of found this out when we were asking teams what they thought of him. They just didn't know what he was. Like you just talk about, he might be a play. Is he an outside corner? Is he a nickel?
Well, the reason they didn't know what he was is because he played outside corner in college, and the sense was that he did not truly have the traits for that. So therefore, people weren't certain. Okay, now that we like the player, but as we transition him to the league, what is he if he's not an outside corner? So I mean, I had the same conversation in my brain numerous times, watching him because I watched him for 2 seasons because obviously he got hurt, you know, I guess halfway or a little beyond halfway of his final
It was,
season at
yeah,
Iowa.
November.
And fortunately, because Matt Bowen, who played at Iowa and is very close to the program, is a very good friend of mine. So I talked to Matt Bowen about him, and he told me a lot of things about the kid, all super positive. He's one of those guys. So, I thought to myself, okay, if he's not truly an outside corner, can he be a star? Meaning, can he be a slot? You know, can he play safety? You start to think, what can he be? But you always came back to the fact that you like the player. So now, that becomes the dilemma when you're evaluating him.
No, you always told us though, Greg, at the NFL level, though, you gotta wind up being you can't play 5 positions for
No,
free. You gotta
no.
play
I
something.
love when I hear that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember when Isaiah Simmons came out a number of years ago, 3 years ago, whatever it was, and he's turned out really not to be anything special in the league. And I'm at the combine, and I'm, talking to a lot of media people, and it's like, well, this guy, he's going to be a 5 position guy, and I'm thinking, so no, he's not. No, it almost goes back to Miles Jack when he came out of UCLA. People might remember he was a running back at UCLA at times.
Yeah,
And I think in one game he gained like 200 yards as a running back. And
Mhm.
people were like, man, he's such a great athlete. You could line him up over Julio Jones on the outside. And I'm thinking, no, you can't. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that in the NFL, you
Right.
know, because when they start with OTAs, they
yeah.
put a guy at a position. That's the way it works, especially a rookie. A
And
rookie's
for,
got to learn how to play a position.
Yeah.
Geoff, remember Christian Parker, the DB's coach, said, we want to get him just doing one position. He's a
Yeah,
rookie anyway. Yeah.
that's that's the way it works.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Good stuff. Let us take a look at the film now. You talked about the front four pressure, and this is a 3rd and 6 in the first quarter that is going
This
to
might
result.
be the play now. I'm because the
Okay.
formation looks. Does Robinson kind of go in a little motion here?
I believe that he does. Yes, if I'm not
Then
mistaken, he does.
who
Yeah.
makes this sack, Geoff?
Josh Sweat from on the top of the
Oh,
screen.
so this is the one where he gets chipped and then
Yep.
he beats Zudu. So this was a
So
great pass. See, it's funny when individual players start to make individual plays that they're not making previously, doesn't everything start to look a little better?
it sure does. And to your point, here's the too high shell. It's very hard in this league, right? To get chipped and then have to beat a left tackle and get the sack. I mean, you
Well,
have to have the quarterback hold on to the ball a
Well,
little
it's
bit
funny you
here.
say that because I'm going to pull up. I spoke to a coach this offseason who's from the Fangio School of Coaching. So he knows the system. And here's what he told me.
Hmm.
I'm trying to get to my notes right now. He said, pre-snap and Fangio scheme, the offense won't know if the coverage will be 4, 6, or 8. And that's exactly what this looks like right now. That's
Right.
sort of one of the defining principles of the Fangio scheme. Because right now, you could go to anything. You could even go to cover 3 from this without it being a problem if you so
Sure.
choose. You can
Sure.
go to anything from this initial quarters look.
Yes, and I would argue, I'm sure in the last few games before this, one of these guys, these safeties that I'm circling here, they were both aligned like this pre-snap, but then somebody would come in the middle, and as you
Right.
said,
And
this
they
would
were
become a
aligned
cover three.
pre-snap this way, the highest percentage in this game of any game this year.
Yes. So here you have the two shell defense that you talked about. That's going to stay that way on this sack.
Is
You have
that Blankenship up top?
it is right here.
Yeah.
That should be.
That's
Yeah.
Blankenship. Yep, and this is CJ.
This may be the play that I was talking about. So let's watch it, and as we watch it, I'll know if it's the play I was speaking about with the match carry deliver.
Gotcha.
Okay, so here we go with the snap. Now
Yeah,
there's your
Robbins. Oh,
motion by
yeah.
Wandale Robinson.
This is it.
There it is,
This is
right
it.
here in
See,
the middle of the screen.
look at
That-
DeJean.
That's the matching. Now he carried him
Now
to
he's
the
going to
middle.
match. Now he's
Right,
going to he's either going to pass him on to the safety or to Dean, one or the other. So
right.
now, but look at DeJean with his right hand.
Mm-hmm.
He's communicating right
Mm.
there.
Yep.
So he's
Right here.
matching. He's carrying. Now he's delivering. He's
Yep.
either going to deliver to the safety because you don't know if Robinson's going to run vertically. Likely not because he's not a vertical receiver. Dean
Mm-hmm.
is now aware of him. And now before we get to the sack part, look at
Yep.
Blankenship, guys. Look at Blankenship. Keep running it, Geoff.
Right here. Just
Yeah.
to let people know.
See
Yep.
how he
He
then
go-
is aware of it as well.
He
Yep.
carried him, and then
That's That's
There's
a
the
perfect.
delivery.
And Robinson is their number one receiver. Even before Neighbors got hurt, Robinson has been their number one target on third down. So
Mm.
they're clearly focused on him. So this was a classic case of match, carry, deliver. And even if there was no pressure, Robinson would not have been available for this throw.
Right. I also you see at the top of the screen here, Greg, Quinyon Mitchell is not giving 20 yards of cushion to Malik
No.
Neighbors. It looks to me at the snap that he wants to go to
And,
Neighbors.
and by the way, look at his technique. They're
Yep.
doing this intentionally. This tells me that if you freeze it for a sec, that they have a really good feel about the concepts that Robinson runs on third down
Mm-hmm.
because Blankenship has no interest in Neighbors whatsoever. You can
Right.
tell by Mitchell's technique that he's playing him with man technique, not
Mm-hmm.
zone technique. He's pushing him to the sideline, to the boundary, because Blankenship is not an over-the-top player or a helper with Mitchell here. So
Right.
they're understanding the Giants' route concepts on third down, and they're taking Robinson away here.
Right. So with Robinson and Neighbors really not open, you see Daniel Jones is looking that way. He's holding. And then, of course, at the top of the screen, Josh Sweat does a really nice job here of first taking on the chip, then beating the left tackle,
Yeah,
Josh Voodoo, that we
if you
said
go
is
to
not
the end
very
zone, you'll
good.
see that Sweat does a great job here
Yep.
because they're actually chipping him, and he defeats the chip by staying on balance. If you go to the
Yeah,
end zone.
bad job by me. I did not get the end zone copy here. So we'll just
Okay,
keep rerunning it from the
yeah,
top.
so you see he
Yep.
beats the chip,
Mm-hmm.
and then he does a great job with his hand usage to beat Azudu, the left tackle, and get in and make the sack.
Right.
Mm.
And then even I will draw attention. I know Vic Fangio hasn't said some great stuff about Bryce Huff, but Bryce Huff does a nice job here around left edge, at least
Yeah,
getting,
and
taking
and,
away any
Mm-hmm.
ability for Daniel to try to pull and run right
and
and
one
collapse in
final
the
point
pocket.
here, which I think speaks to Sweat's intelligence on this given play,
Mm-hmm.
and he's an intelligent player anyway, is because he's being chipped. Okay, I
Mm-hmm.
and certainly the left tackle Azudu knows the protection, so he knows he's getting chipped. So what is he expecting? He's expecting Sweat to be on the inside of him now based on the chip.
Right.
So that's where he's going to do his focus. So Sweat understands that too.
And
So
puts an
instead of
outside,
staying
yeah.
inside, he then works back outside, which is not the strength of Azudu in this particular protection concept.
Right. A big concept is the whole idea of marrying, right, your coverage with your pass rush and vice versa. If you remember 2 years ago, James Bradbury has an all-pro year. Maybe he's not that good, but the Eagles have a historic pass rush that helped the secondary, and of course, the secondary helped the pass
And
rush.
that's a great point. And then last year, the pass rush was nowhere near as good. And Bradbury, just later in his career, that's what happens at times. He just got exposed because the pass rush went from being the best in the league and ridiculously good on third down to being
Mhm.
one of the worst in the league and really bad on third down. And that exposed Bradbury last year.
Right.
Greg, one more thing before we move on here. Do you see a lot of the match carry deliver principles? You see a lot of that around the league now? Has
Oh
that
yeah,
been
yeah, that's
pretty
foundational.
popular?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Love it.
think there's my good friend Andy Benoit would know the exact number,
Yeah.
but I think there's 10 or 11 clear Fangio disciple in the league.
Wow,
But
that many. Jeez.
but there's the match carry deliver has become a significant part of zone concepts.
The father of match carry deliver, Vic Fangio.
Yeah.
We call him that? Okay.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
One thing I've learned in doing a lot of, research over the years, for instance, when I did the book with Ron Jaworski
Yeah.
and I saw a zone blitz by the the Boston Patriots in 1963. So I'm always leery of saying someone is
Sure.
started
Sure.
something
Yeah.
because, yeah.
Someone will find out, hey, no,
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
this
yeah,
guy. I
yeah.
got you. Yeah.
All right. Again, we're going to talk about pressure, and we'll look at the film, Greg. I'm sure noted for you by who was creating the pressure and how it was created here. This is a third down play in the second quarter, 3rd and 3, and we have Nolan Smith lined up over left
Was this
tackle
his
here.
sack?
It is his sack.
Now, this was his best pass rush of the year,
Yep.
because this was a speed to power concept. As I've always said to you guys, and so fans understand, you have to be able to play off contact as a pass rusher. Whether you initiate the contact, whether it's initiated by the tackle, you've got to be able to play off it. And here he initiates it. He's wide, so he uses his speed, generates some velocity, and then gets excellent arm extension. This is his best pass rush of the year in the regular season.
And once again, Greg, on a third down, you've got the too high shell that's going to
Yep.
stay that way. And look again at your corners, not giving 10 to 15
Right.
yards of cushion. I think that's
Right.
a really big part of this as
And, and
well.
and by the way, Geoff, because of the position of the corners here, this might, in the mind of Jones, present a little different coverage look than the previous play we just looked at. It might be the same, but it might be different because the corners are tighter to the receivers on this in this particular look. Even and the safeties are a touch deeper. If you notice here, they're a
Yes.
touch deeper than the previous play, even though it's still a two shell structure. They're deeper. These are little things. This is what coaches and players do. They look for all these things for tells.
Right. Right. All right. So as we run it at the snap here, you can even see the linebacker creeps up a little bit. It's Bond. Here's the snap. You have a leak out from the running back on the left side. But look at the contact here between Bond and the tight end, right? He gets his hands on him, and you see
This
you
might
got
be
good tight coverage here from your corners.
This actually might even be two-man. Let me see.
I
No, they're
believe
playing
it.
zone. They're
No, no,
playing zone.
right. It's a
But
pass off, right?
right.
So is this sort of the match, the
Well,
carry delivery here from Slay to
yeah,
Bond?
even up top in the slot. Look at DeJean
Yep.
and Dean. Look at
Yep.
DeJean and Dean.
Look at them pass off right here.
Passes off, and
Ah,
then he goes into the slot,
right.
which is his responsibility. Excuse me, the flat, which is
Yep.
his responsibility.
And it looks like Jones wants to hit one of these guys, but there's no room for him there because he's looking in the middle of the field at this point. And then as we see, Nolan Smith here at the top of the screen, look at them put his hands into I
Yeah.
mean, we get it. We know the left tackle is a backup and should be a
No,
guard,
this is a
but
good pass rush.
yeah, it's a good pass
You
rush.
got to respond to what the film shows.
Yep.
I mean, that's the way it works. You
Right,
know,
right.
I mean,
So I
yeah,
did
this
get
one you
the
do have the
end
end
zone
zone,
view
and
of
you'll see
that
it. You'll see it. He generates the contact. Look, he goes
right
right
there.
into him,
Stays
right,
low. Nice.
so,
Low man wins. Yep.
and then extends right there and beats him.
Yeah,
Yep.
that is the epitome of a speed to power rush, right, Greg?
And the thing that he needs in his game, which
Hmm.
may help him become, again, he's in his second year. He needs a one-arm stab, which is a speed to power rush move.
Right,
That's what he needs.
The
right.
biggest knock on him, guy, we know this, but just for fans to understand, is the lack of power in his game from Georgia. Every scout we talked to said the same thing. This guy's not going to went the next level until he learns how to rush with power.
Right. And by the way, can he learn it? Sure. Because some of that's technique. It's not. I
Okay.
mean, look, the guy's never going to weigh 255. Okay, he's got a waist that we'd all love to have. He's never going to be 255 or
Hey,
260.
speak for yourself.
Hey, I've lost a lot of weight in the last 4
So
or
have
5
I.
months. I've been going to the gym 5 days a week. But anyway,
By the way, Jones is a good runner. If you can envision maybe 2 games ago, Smith not trying to just use speed only and go wide here, then Jones doesn't feel that pressure and may be able, with Dean coming this way, to run for that first down. So it's a really important play here for him to collapse the pocket with power.
One thing just to keep in mind, a quick point. I know we want to get to other things.
Mhm.
When you play true two shell coverage and it's zone, underneath defenders have to be very aware of matching and walling because don't forget if it's a 2-by-2 set, okay, if an underneath receiver runs across some kind of crosser, if you're the underneath defender on that side and you let him go, you're passing him on to no one because the underneath defender on the other side has his own match player to deal with. So depending on how the routes develop, you have to match and wall at times as well. You can't just let guys run by you because you're passing them on to no one.
Right. All right, last one, Greg. I promised Adam I would show this play. It is a 2nd and 10, and the real thing to watch here is at the bottom of the screen where Quinyon Mitchell
Oh,
is
is this where he
really
had
up.
the hard press jam?
It
The
is
Yep.
the hard press. I
physicality
told
on
Adam I
David?
fell out of my chair when I saw
Yeah.
this happen. Okay, that's
Well,
how
he's
surprised I
capable
was.
of this.
I
Yep.
was told like this is the big issue for him,
Mhm.
because he didn't do it.
Well, he didn't do it in college.
Right.
Right.
And
But
teams run or can
I
can
spoke to
do.
an Eagles coach who told me he's more than capable of doing it. He just has to
Good.
get caught.
There you go. All right.
Okay.
So here you see again a too high look. You know, you got the Giants. This is 2nd and 10.
Well,
Jones is going to wind up running, but at the
here's the other
snap.
factor here. What's the formation? 3-by-1, correct?
Yep.
So I
Mhm.
guarantee that they're doing this. My guess would be that Blankenship, the safety to the boundary, is probably going to be focused on number 3 to trips. What a lot of
Mhm.
teams do is they'll put their best receiver at boundary X. Um, is that Neighbors? Yes.
This is Neighbors here at the
Number one.
boundary X.
Now, in this case, the Giants didn't do it, but a lot of teams will put their best receiver at boundary X and then their fastest receiver at number 3 to trips. The
Mm.
way teams talk about it is speed to 3. And that means that the backside, the boundary safety has to get eyes on 3 because there's no way you can have an underneath linebacker running with speed to 3. So
Right.
now, essentially, even if it's a zone call, the boundary corner in 3-by-1 ends up playing man to man.
And Slayton
Right.
would be that guy, Greg, right? You would say he's their fastest
Yeah.
receiver.
Yeah, yeah. Now it's not him here. I think that's the
Right.
tight end,
Right.
judging by the
This is
size of him.
yeah.
Yeah,
But as far as receivers, he's their fastest guy.
he would be their fastest. I
So
mean,
yeah.
technically Hyatt probably might be, but he doesn't play
He didn't
much.
play.
Right.
Yeah.
And by the way, you see the Eagles are showing
They're
like
showing a
they're
double
running.
mug.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily going to be the case as we roll it. Just everybody focus on the bottom of the screen here because
Yeah.
this is really the what I wanted to show. And you know Jones wants to go to him if he can.
Well,
Bam,
it's
look at
funny
that.
because it's not speed to 3. Blankenship it does play over. See, Blankenship's playing over the top, almost like a cover 2 safety, which I
Yep.
believe he is here, and
Hmm.
that's why Mitchell can do this because even if Neighbors beats him, he's
Right.
going to have help over the top.
Wow,
Yep.
look at that. Look at
Look
the
at that. I
bottom.
mean,
Look at that.
look how physical he got. You love
Yeah,
it. And
it's great.
by the way, it's not done. It's not done. They're still within 5 yards. So guess what? Bang. Right to the ground.
Yeah,
I
Hey,
love it.
is that within 5 yards?
it might
Yes.
not have been.
Let's see. He's at the 47, and the second contact occurs at the 42. That's pretty close, right? Pretty close.
5 yard chuck.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, I think for what we saw the first 3 weeks, you're happy with seeing
So,
out of
so
the
this
Eagles.
coverage, just so people can understand, is what we call cover 6, meaning
Mhm.
it's cover 2 to the boundary and cover 4 to the field. That's what
Right.
this is. So it's because Mitchell's a cover 2 corner here, which is why he can do this because he's not responsible. If
Mhm.
let's say Neighbors beat him off the jam right away and ran
Yep.
by him, it's
Hmm.
okay because you got Blankenship as a deep safety, half field safety here. They're playing
Right.
cover 2 to this side.
Right. Right. So you saw as at the snap, he was trying to get Neighbors. He looked there. So now he's got to go to his other options. And a nice job, as you mentioned, by the line here. I think that's Graham inside, and the edge rusher is Sweat to kind of push that pocket, force Jones to the right. And guess what? Remember Saquon Barkley stepping 1 yard and out of bounds too
Yeah.
soon? So does Daniel Jones. All right, Greg, let's transition to the offense. As we mentioned, it was a strange game, not very good on third down. Even the run game, right? 270 yards, but I think you would agree it wasn't even very impactful until the second quarter when Saquon Barkley ripped off the
Well,
55-yard
taking nothing
run.
away from Barkley, he had 3 really long runs, and I
Mhm.
didn't, easily could add up those numbers, but those 3 long runs gave him well over 100 yards.
Right, right. And as we'll look at them soon, some of that was not even other than Barkley being fast. There was some good scheme going on to get
Yeah,
him
they did a nice
free.
job in the run game. They
Yeah,
got
what
a
did you
nice run
see?
game.
What did you see from the offensive line in both run game and pass pro?
Pass pro was hard to deal with. I mean, because they didn't throw it a lot. Obviously the focus was on Fred Johnson playing left tackle. I thought he was really good in the run game. Needs work in the pass game. In pass protection. But
Hmm.
other than that, I thought they did a nice job. And we joked at the beginning about Ben Van Sumeren, but obviously that's something they really wanted to do. They did it 5 times in the game. There were 2 or 3 of those where he really made nice blocks. One on one of the Barkley's long runs, he got a Karake. It was a really nice block, second level block. We'll see if that's something they continue.
It's funny, Greg, with Van Sumeren. I remember you, and ironically, it was against the Giants. You had asked me, you'd said to me, "Is anyone talk about Van Sumeren?" I'm like, "Yeah, we heard he played well." You go, "Oh my God, this kid is really good." One
Yeah, he
started.
played really well in
Yeah,
that game he started last year, really
yeah,
well.
yeah.
He was the workout warrior. He was not at the combine,
Oh,
but remember he had at his Michigan State Pro Day, he blew it up.
mm,
Yes,
how about
yes.
that?
So, Greg, people ask Adam and I this pretty frequently this week, and I wanted to get your perspective on it. The Eagles scored 28 points, and I think any coach would sign up for 28 points a game, regardless of how they get it, right? 28 offensive points per game. And yet the Eagles have shown to be a very big play offense, but not a very long drive, time of possession
Oh.
offense. Does that matter if you can score 28 points a game? And when you watch other offenses that are more deliberate, more methodical, do you think that that's better than 28 points a game being explosive?
Well, the way I'd answer that is this, and then I know we want to get to some plays.
Yeah.
If you can run the ball well, okay, and your defense plays really well, which obviously was the case in this game, then in some ways you can still win without your offense being efficient, okay?
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, this is what the Chiefs have been this year, and they're undefeated. Their pass game has not been efficient and sustaining at all, but they've developed a powerful run game, and they have arguably the best defense in the league. And and Mahomes is dangerous on any given play, and incredibly clutch in when he makes those Mahomes plays. So yes, can you win? Sure you can. But is that the goal? Does a coach go into a game? This is what you have to think about. Does a coach
Mm-hmm.
go into a game and say, "Hey, we got a great run game and a great defense, so you know what? It's okay if our offense isn't really that good. We still can score some points."
Right.
The coach doesn't say that.
Right.
They're trying to be really good all the time.
Sure.
So you can't just look at a win and say, and I've learned this all through the years talking to a ton of coaches. Coaches are always coaching. They're never happy. There's always things to correct. No one comes away from a win, even if the team wins 45 nothing and says, "You know what, guys, we're going to take the whole week off because we won 45 nothing. There's nothing to correct or talk about."
A
That's
lot to
not
clean up.
that's nothing that's not the way it works.
Right. All right. Well, let's take a look at that first Barkley big run. So also tip your cap to Kellen Moore, right, on how he schemed this up. So here's the formation. You've got
Three by
a
one. It's bunch. It's a wide bunch.
right, which I think helps how this run develops.
Well, what
Uh,
it presents to the defense before the play even starts is the potential of a screen to the wide side of the field. So
mm-hmm.
there's an alert immediately for a tunnel screen, bubble screen, whatever you want to call it, to the wide side of the field. And if you noticed, a linebacker's already kind of shifted over,
Yeah, him.
to the trips part of the formation because there's an alert to that. You're aware of that.
Right. So that just takes him a little bit further away from
Well,
where
it
the
takes him
play is
kind of
going.
makes him more of an overhang player than a box player.
Correct. So here we are, and I'll run it at the snap.
And by the way, they show screen look.
Yep.
Right there.
Yep.
Bubble.
And you can see,
Yeah.
geez, sorry about that for everybody watching.
I mean, Barkley's fast, Geoff, but not that fast.
Right. You can see the leaning of not only the linebacker, but the safety to the passing strength side.
Yeah, so
right?
right now, yeah, you've got a pursuit player on the backside removed from the equation. I think that's Okereke.
Right.
And so they run to the boundary. This is a beautifully designed play. We talked about this with the Patreon group. It's basically a center pull scheme to the boundary.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's 3 by 1 and they're actually matching up man to the boundary, which a lot of teams do.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're getting here is you're getting Banks playing man to man on AJ Brown, who's the X, and so he comes with him inside. Brown knows he's taking him with him, so he's going up to get the safety, and he's not worried about the corner because he's got the puller. He's got Jurgens pulling, so he's not worried about the corner.
Right. As you can
And actually,
see,
Steen does a great job here too.
yeah, I wanted to highlight that Steen from the right guard position
because he does not have a good angle here. So all he's trying to do is get some hands on McFadden just to get him off balance. He can't get in front of him because the angle's not there.
56.
Right.
Yep.
Right. You don't want to be called for holding either and be behind him. So this is or clipping. Right. Yeah. So there you go. And then bam. This is a beautiful block by Jurgens right here on Banks, I believe that is.
Yeah, and you win that matchup right away.
Yeah, that's almost Jason Kelce-esque. And then of course,
look at him run down the field.
Even Caplan could have gained 20 yards on this play.
Maybe 5. I don't know.
My age 10.
Yeah, but again, like, you talk about a game of inches, right? Because he was outside the linebacker Okiriki, and because this safety were leaning toward the passing strength side, it takes him a while to get there, and
Yep.
it probably tacked on maybe 10 extra yards for this run for Saquon Barkley. So that was a really well schemed run where Barkley, again, nice job by Saquon, but all he had to do was be fast, which he is. And so that was one of the explosive Eagles runs there. Now there was another one that we're going to look at, Greg, and this is where Ben Van Sumeren gets involved.
Was this the ad? This was
This was the 38-yard run, sort of a backside counter, right? Where right here is Van Sumeren as your, what would you call that? Offset fullback or
well, here he's in a wing tight end position.
wing tight end. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, wing tight end position. As you see, he's coming
So,
around
so
the
th
scrimmage.
this is inside zone split flow. He's the split flow blocker, crossing the formation to seal the end.
Yeah,
He's sealing the widest defender on the line of scrimmage, whoever that may be.
right. Also, his motion, right, draws this. I believe that's a safety in the box. His motion from left to right here is going to draw that safety wide and
Yeah.
just give a Saquon enough
Well,
space.
no.
No?
That's not what draws a safety wide.
Oh, okay.
What draws a safety wide is this has his own read look to it as
Oh, you're right. It's
well.
it's Jalen
And,
Hurts.
and
Okay,
then
good
he's
point.
the Hurts defender because notice that the end, who is Van Sumeren's responsibility, he's
Mhm.
crashing down. So this is a crash scrape concept to play the zone read possibility. So that linebacker is responsible for Hurts.
Right. Now here's where the beauty of Saquon is Saquon because he's sort of setting up the block here. He goes right, he does a little plant the right leg here and does a little shimmy and then just completely gets past the safety.
Yeah, see,
That's tough with
that's what
Saquon.
Saquon is. It's not really like a juke move. Like he's not shifty. He's a
Right.
darter and a slasher more than a shifty runner.
Yeah.
Because he's not really loose hipped. He's a little
Right.
tight hipped.
We've
Like
noticed
he's not like, and this is not a knock on him. And I always feel like I have to qualify stuff because then you know how it is on social media. He's not loose hipped like a Jameer Gibbs or a Bijan Robinson. He's a little
right.
tighter, so he's more of a darter and a slasher than a loose hipped, shake and
Yes.
bake guy.
Yeah, and I think that actually shows sometimes because we talk about his contact balance. Like here, he sort of stumbles off of because it's almost like his feet are too fast for the rest of his body.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
he doesn't have a low center of gravity like some of the
No,
shorter
he's
running backs
incredibly
do.
explosive straight line. That's what he is.
Yeah. So we'll take a look at this from this angle. And again, here's Van Sumeren lined up as that wing tight end. Really good athlete, by the way. Played baseball in high school. I was a pitcher and an
Somebody
outfielder.
told me in the organization that he has unbelievable hands, and
Yeah.
I'm curious to see if they'll add that to the repertoire. You
Wow.
know,
He
Well,
was a
as they
Greg,
go
fullback in high
forward.
school? Was he a fullback?
he
That I don't know. I
was
didn't look up
Tight
his
end.
background.
he was a
Yeah,
tight. Well, he went to Michigan first as a tight end, I believe, right? And then
Yeah.
became a
uh,
linebacker.
yeah,
And by the way, Andrew DeCecco wrote a story, Greg, to your point about the reason the origins of using him as a fullback or on offense came when he intercepted a pass in practice at training camp and put a move on somebody.
yeah.
So he showed good
Oh,
hands and then
but I
good
was told
agility.
his hands were the way that I was explained to me by a guy in the organization, just so you know,
Yeah.
was
Mhm.
that he had the best hands on the team, including receivers. That's
What?
what the guy told me.
Wow. That's pretty
Wow.
impressive.
Yeah.
Maybe he will catch
Now,
the ball.
I'm not there. I'm just
Yeah.
telling you what a guy who said practice, he's
Yeah.
there, you know.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. All right, Greg, we're going to run through really quickly this last clip. And this is a little bit about the struggles we talked about in the past game where either not seeing it or the throw to be made and it's not. And this is, I do forget at the moment, I think it's 2nd and 11 here.
Well, this is going to
And
be mesh, which is a very staple
yes,
concept for them and for every team in the league.
right. So it's the 3-by-1 formation.
Yeah.
Or do you call this 1-by-3 because he's
It's
not?
1-by-3 with an attached tight end.
Right. So that's
Yeah.
Grant Calcaterra attached, and here's your 3. And they're going to run a mesh concept, which you've already described. You see the crossing here in the middle. Now, Calcaterra, I want everybody to focus on, as I screwed that up, Calcaterra, because as he crosses right to left, right here is where the ball has to be thrown, and that's the design of the play. You see the safety, he's going to get caught up in the traffic a little bit, right?
Yeah, Nubin's, but this is man coverage, which is what Mesh's call. Mesh's is technically a man beater because it has a natural pick element to it.
Right,
And who's
right
coming
here.
across running
AJ
that
Brown.
Is that
AJ
AJ?
Brown. Yep.
So he does a great job of avoiding Nubin, so he doesn't call for
OPI, right?
yeah. But I mean, the ball's
OPI.
got to be thrown now.
Right now.
Yep.
And by the way, if not now, then now, or now, or now. And it's just so late.
Well,
that
Mesh
he
is
gave
never
the-
meant to be caught outside the numbers. Never.
Say that again.
Mesh is never meant to be caught outside the numbers.
Look where he's catching it. Right outside the numbers. And that's why the safety
Short of
was able to
sticks.
catch up.
For some reason,
yeah.
Jalen is struggling with the mesh concept. I know they've hit some big plays on it where
Mhm.
guys have, where it's been clean, like obviously the Goddard against the Saints for 61 yards to set up the winning touchdown, where the two guys ran into each other. The 45-yarder to Smith, the touchdown against Cleveland, where it was so wide open it didn't matter. But mesh is a man beater because it has a natural pick or rub element to it.
Right. And it just wasn't there. And because of that, they don't get the first down on this. But where I feel like if he gets him right here, Greg, and he catches it here, he might be able to turn up the field and get up the left sideline. And who knows what he can do there. But just another example, because we saw a couple of those examples on the tape. So that's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Tape with Greg Cosell.
Just as a quick preview, and then we'll wrap up. This will be just so people can have something to be teased with.
Yeah.
This game against Cincinnati, the hat will be worn by Mitchell and Slay.
Covering Jamar Chase and T. Higgins.
Because when Joe Burrow sees, and we'll go into detail, when Joe Burrow sees one-on-one outside the numbers, he throws the ball.
All right. That was going to ask you what you would be keying on, and you carried and delivered, Greg.
There you go. Well, that's just one thing, Geoff. But I mean, just so people can, know that what we'll talk about, on Sunday morning.
All right. Sounds great. For Greg Cosell and Adam Caplan, I'm Geoff Mosher. You've been watching Inside the Tape with Greg Cosell. Catch you on the next one.